So, the ZA review is coming out eventually, but I am doing the channel's namesake and procrastinating on it. In the meantime, I did see the Amazing Digital Circus episode 8, and that was a doozy. Especially what happened with Gummy Goo. That was horrifying. But then the other thing about this episode is how I thought the name thing worked. Because obviously the episode 7 where Pomni accuses Caine of making them forget their own names is just a Pomni suggestion and is not really a thing that Caine can do, even if he wanted to. Even if he wanted to change that part of the circus, he can't. But what's weird is that Kinger and Queenie know each other and recognize each other, but they also can't remember each other's real names. So that kind of throws a wrench in my original interpretation of how the names work, or maybe not. Because the original interpretation that I had was it works like setting up your computer profile or starting a game save file, where when you start the game, you go through character customization, but then after character customization, you are then prompted to give a name. And it's really, really apparent in Deltarune and somewhat Undertale, but more Deltarune, where you're asked at the beginning of Deltarune to name the vessel that you're going to play as. Ultimately, Deltarune doesn't let you play as that vessel that you selected. You are forced to play as Frisk, but that is getting at the larger idea of gaming in general, where you are not playing as yourself in Pokemon. You are playing as this pre-selected sprite of Red, but you're not you. You're playing Red. You know? You're not you. You're playing your avatar in the Pokemon game. You're playing this character. And most people like to, imagine that they are playing themselves, but in reality, you're not. You're playing this character. Not to say that you're not acting like your real life version, but that game version of yourself is not you. Hence, you are playing as a character. And in the digital circus, everyone here is playing a character that, like in every game, starts out with a blank string as their original name. Most games have placeholder names, but when you are putting your name in, it is initially a blank string. There are no characters in the string, and if you were to use hacks to get past that part of the game of selecting a name, then when the game tries to call upon that blank string, it's not going to put anything in there. It's going to, because the name doesn't exist, so it's just forgotten, erased from the mind of the game. So that's essentially what is happening in the digital circus. Is they're maybe not going through character customization. It's probably a random assignment of a digital body. But then Caine is not bothering to assign them a name either. And they arrive in the digital circus with a blank string, and the game cannot conjure up a name because no player put in a name. Like the human consciousnesses is the humans who are in the game are subject to the rules of the game. They are forced to play the circus as it is intended. And how the circus is intended to work is probably an outside player is supposed to input a name for a given character, because it's supposed, like, the circus that Caine has created is like a RuneScape type game that he made. But since Caine can't come up with anything original, he can only look at what, RuneScape and other MMOs and other chat rooms do. He's like, yeah, I'll just do that for the circus too. Not knowing that, those particular games require a human at a digital interface, not a human consciousness within and subject to the digital circus that you've created for yourself and the other humans. So yeah, it's just what's happening with the names is not exactly Caine's fault. Is not exactly Caine's influence. I guess it is his fault, but it's not exactly Caine's influence. He's not purposefully making them forget their names. It's just there is no outside player to input a name on this character, and so it just, in order to get the human consciousness in so they can judge his adventures, it just skips the naming process, and that's why nobody remembers their names. But throughout the years, Caine has realized eventually, he didn't realize it originally, that first group of humans didn't really, it didn't really matter to him, because he just, when he bent them and broke them and they abstracted, he just threw them in the basement where he had been trapped and forgot about them. But then I guess he eventually realized when new humans started popping up with Ragatha that, well, I mean, not initially with Ragatha, but like eventually after, some point after Ragatha showed up, that he should give them a name so that they'll stop whining about not having a name and actually just judge his adventures. But yeah, if I haven't already talked about it, the thing about Queenie not remembering Kinger's real name and Kinger not remembering Queenie's real name is probably also a thing of, they are part of the system that is the digital circus. So even if they did have that part in their memory, even if they did have that name in their memory at one point, when that person was put in the digital circus, their name in the entire system was replaced with blank string. So that's my best guess as to why the two of them couldn't remember each other's name, and why Kinger can't remember Scratch's original name. That was a system-wide update of this character, that is this human intelligence, is now recognized as either blank string or the string that somebody came up with. Kinger or Caine probably came up with the name of Scratch, and Caine obviously came up with the name Kinger when Ragatha appeared. Okay. The Amazing Digital Circus episode 8 released about a week ago, and I just had to prime myself with a bunch of TikToks to finally record this. So, I don't think anyone understands how the digital circus works. Like, none of the audience knows how the digital circus works, because all of the TikToks that I've seen have people still assuming that what Abel said was correct, or that it was true in any way. None of what that wooden figure said was the truth at all. You cannot trust that wooden figure because he wasn't Abel. There are no bodies hooked up to brain scanning thingies like in the Matrix. I understand why people think about that, because the Matrix did it, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. did it, I'm sure The Simpsons has referenced it, and even DCAU did it. with Superman and that one plant and Darkseid, you know, and it hooked up to Superman's brain and it made him imagine that he was still on Krypton and had a son and a wife and a dog and they were all living happy on Krypton and his dad was still alive and blah, 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 blah. Everyone assumes it's like that because that's the way it is in the public zeitgeist. That's not how it is. Soma theory is confirmed in episode 8. It's Soma theory. The brain scans, the folder of old brain scans that we see on the computer that Kinger is interfacing with, that's where everyone is. There are no bodies hooked up. There's no getting out of the circus because everyone in the circus who's a human is a human brain scan. The whole point of the show is to accept your lot in life and learn to make it better. Caine never learned that lesson, and he died because of it. Like, it's not you have to settle, it's that you are given certain parameters in life, and you have to figure out how to use those parameters to have a good life. None of the brain scans, none of the characters can get out. Their human that they were taken from is living their best life outside of the Amazing Digital Circus, unaware that a copy of themselves is trapped inside the body of a jester, a rag doll, a ribbon with a theater mask, a bunch of parts, and a cartoony lagomorphic thing that is definitely not a rabbit. Now, as for the explanation of the red and blue dot at the beginning of the episode, I am still unsure whether Caine is the representation of the both of the AIs fighting each other, or if Caine is more the representation of the red dot. I don't know. But Bubble is not the blue dot. You have to listen to Kinger's explanation while that first part is going on. That helped me kind of understand it. Like, I brought up the audio of Kinger explaining stuff while that first part of the episode was playing. Kinger led the project to create Caine because, to quote Kinger, or I guess to paraphrase Kinger, the rest of the team didn't understand what Scratch wanted to make. And so, Kinger led an initial project to get the rest of the team's heads wrapped around the concept. Caine was never supposed to be a final product. Caine was a rough draft. Caine was a storyboard. Caine was a prototype. He was never meant to see the public or whatever Scratch intended for himself. That's a whole nother theory. But Kinger led the rest of the team on this storyboard, on this first rough draft run, to get people accustomed to what they were going to do. Because it's 1996. Pokemon is just released in Japan. The buggy mess that it is. Donkey Kong released 2 years before now. Even if you're a programmer who has spent their whole life learning about computers and language programs, you're not going to know, unless you're a genius, what an artificial intelligence could look like, coding-wise. So that's why Caine was created, to get the rest of the team, because Scratch had an idea of what it looked like, and Kinger understood him well enough to translate for the rest of the team, but nobody else had any idea of what it was that they were doing until they made Caine, saw how he worked, of you input information into the red dot, it produces these shapes. You input more information in the red dot, it creates sort of shapes, and by the third time they input more information, the shapes came out all wacky. And so they were like, okay, we've taken this rough draft as far as we can. We understand kind of where we're going. So let's start our first attempt at the final project. But we'll keep the rough draft around just in case, we need to refer back to it at any point. Because that's a thing that you have to do in any writing project, is you have to get all of your ideas down first, and then you can go back later and edit them. But it's not create paper and then edit paper until they want you to make rough draft, then start over with the knowledge of what your rough draft was and write new paper. So we've done our rough draft, and it went as well as it could have without any idea of what we were doing. And so now we start our first actual attempt at final product. We start our attempt at Blue Dot, at Able. And Able did better than Caine did at, once the programmers had an idea, before when they didn't have an idea. The red dot produced 6 shapes. When they had an idea of what they were programming, the blue dot, when it was fed its first packet of information, produced like 9 or 10 shapes. And that was 96.